verified. Now we start with Russia and Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry has stated that its forces captured the village of Uspenivka in eastern Ukraine as part of intensified operations in the Pokrovsk direction. The move comes amid reports that Moscow is bolstering troop strength in the area to consolidate territorial gains from infiltration missions and push deeper into Ukrainian defenses. Geolocated footage from late October shows Russian troops advancing southeast of Balahan, while pro-Russian bloggers claim progress near the T-0515 Pokrovsk Dobropilia highway and the Pokrovsk mine complex. Ukrainian forces reported destroying 3 Russian vehicles during a mechanized assault near Mirnorad on November 5th. Officials in Kyiv have also accused Russian troops of disguising themselves as civilians, a breach of the Geneva Conventions. Now for this discussion, we welcome Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for joining us again. Good to see you. Alison, are we to believe that Russia is gaining momentum in front lines towards Pokrovsk?
From the reports from recent days, it's clear that they are pressing very hard. They are making some gains, but I think they might be overstating their gains and what they've achieved. I've been looking at what the Ukrainians have been saying, and the Ukrainians seem to be fighting back very hard. In one village, the first one you've mentioned, I think Russia has pressed forward, and they've actually claimed they've captured it. That's the one with proof. I can't remember proof of Reza. But the Ukrainians say it hasn't been captured and fighting is continuing. So obviously it's in the Russian interest to say that they are winning more than they are winning, for morale at home, for the psychology, for Vladimir Putin, who wants to show that his army is doing very well, particularly in this eastern region, which is very strategic to Russia. But it's not clear. I think they are probably overstating it. I think there's definitely an offensive. There's no doubt about that. They're definitely trying their hardest. You know, as your report said, some of them are reported to have dressed up as civilians, which is against the UN Convention. But it seems, from what I'm reading from the Ukrainian side, that they haven't actually gained what they said they have gained. But again, the problem is we don't have any independent observers in there. We don't have the Red Cross. We don't have, more importantly for me, we don't have the international media in there. So it's just listening to both sides. But Russia does have a long tradition of propaganda and hybrid war, and they are very good at promoting narratives that suit their purpose.
And you know, we also saw that Ukrainian forces reported that Russian army or army personnel disguised as civilians in those regions. What if these were proved? Is there any repercussions of such acts towards Russia?
I think also with earlier other anti-war offences which are against the Geneva Convention, there are prosecutors obviously in Ukraine, but not only in Ukraine, UN prosecutors who will be keeping records of these violation of the UN Convention, of which there have been very, very, very many reported over the last almost 4 years. So this will be recorded for sure by prosecutors, and at some point there will be a trial, but justice obviously moves very slowly compared to what happens on the battlefield. But for sure, if there are reports of this, credible reports of this, and obviously there would need to be some evidence, then yes, prosecutors will be noting this down and building a case against Russia for accusations of violating the Geneva Convention, for sure.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Alison, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. Now, the Kremlin has defended North Korea's reported ballistic missile launch, saying Pyongyang has a legitimate right to take measures to ensure its security. The statement comes amid growing Western concerns over deepening military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has also told reporters that Russia is respectful of the right of North Korea for self-defense. Russia has increasingly aligned itself with North Korea since the start of its war with Ukraine, exchanging diplomatic and defense support in defiance of Western sanctions. Now we go back to Alison Mutler. She's a former AP bureau chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us. Now looking at this, how do you see Russia and North Korea's alignment now, as we also think that it's very close, more than ever before? And also, how do you analyze Russia's continuous defense of North Korea's missile launches as self-defense? Do you think it can be justified?
It doesn't matter whether it can be justified. Russia and North Korea have a strategic military and political alliance now, particularly since Russia invaded Ukraine. We know that I think it was the first actual evidence that North Korean soldiers were actually fighting Ukraine. Obviously, there's always been, paid soldiers, military soldiers, which are paid, but they're not official. But I think it came out last summer that North Koreans are actually fighting on the ground in Ukraine. So North Korea is extremely important for Russia as an ally, and also for their military, for their war program, for their war efforts. And politically, Russia is a dictatorship, whether it says it is or not. And North Korea is the world's probably most famous dictatorship. So they do have ideological links as well. And when in a time of war, allies stick together. It doesn't matter whether the other side is wrong or right, they stick together. And that's what Russia is doing with North Korea. And I'm sure North Korea is very grateful for Russia's support, but also Russia really needs North Korea as well. So we can expect on the international stage, whatever happens, that Russia will defend North Korea, and North Korea will continue to provide soldiers to fight in Ukraine.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Alison for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, a top German military official has warned that Russia has the capacity to launch a limited attack against NATO territory at any time, stating that it could happen as early as the next day, depending on the military posture of Western powers. Lieutenant General Alexander Solfrank, who heads Germany's Joint Operations Command and oversees defense planning, has also echoed NATO warnings that Russia could potentially mount a large-scale assault on the 32-member alliance as early as 2029 if its armament efforts persist. However, the Russian president has denied any aggressive intentions, claiming that Ukraine war is a defensive response to NATO's expansionist ambitions. In recent months, tensions between the West and Russia have increased multifold, as Europe seeks to utilize frozen Russian assets to fund loans to Ukraine and considers the potential transfer of long-range weapons. The frontliners have intensified with strikes on critical energy facilities and civil infrastructure from both sides. Now we welcome back Alison Mutler. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us. Alison, now looking at this, even though Russia denies any expansion or attacking NATO, but how credible are NATO and German assessments of potential Russian attack? What do you think?
I would personally take Germany very, very seriously. Germany had a very interesting relationship with Russia. They had a strategic alliance. They depended on them for energy, and there was a political goodwill. If we think of Gerhard Schröder, the former chancellor, who now works for a Russian company, and even Angela Merkel, she enjoyed a warm relationship with Vladimir Putin. Obviously, this is before Russia invaded Ukraine, but historically, Russia and Germany in the last decades have had a very, very good relationship. Now that has changed as the situation has changed in Europe as the war has continued, and particularly since Friedrich Merz was elected Chancellor. I think he said a couple of months ago, which was quite a grave statement, we are no longer at peace with Russia. And that was quite significant because of Germany's historic friendship with Russia. And it's clear that the Germans are very well aware of the fact that the war could spread to Europe. And now we have this general, to be honest, stating the obvious. But what makes it interesting is the fact that he is the most senior military official in Germany, and Germany is a very serious country and would not like to be in this position with Russia, with which it had a good relationship in the past. So I think it's to be taken very, very seriously. And if we look at the situation, we have already had drone incursions. I know Russia denies that it was its drones and said that NATO did it itself, but that generally seems to be part of the usual Russian denial hybrid war, where they don't admit anything. They don't even say that war is Ukraine. They call it a special military operation. It's absolutely absurd. So I think I think he's quite right. The general saying this. Of course, Russia could launch an attack, but he also said it wouldn't be a large-scale attack at this point because they have all their manpower tied up in Ukraine. They couldn't afford to do that unless they were to do something absolutely outrageous, such as a nuclear attack, which I don't see them doing at all. At the moment, because they would prefer to escalate the war gradually rather than just pull their bigger weapons out. But yes, of course they could. We've already had drone incursions. They could do it. I don't know where. I think military officials, military experts, military intelligence know where. But yes, and I think what the German general is saying, they're trying to warn Europe. We cannot think that this war is just going to be limited to Ukraine. It could spread beyond Ukraine's borders into Europe, into European allies, into NATO countries, into EU countries. So I think his statements, as much as anything, are a wake-up call for people who still think that it's peace as usual in Europe.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Alison for sharing that extensive insight on this news.